$5 million. That's what she cost. 22 years old, virgin, law student with a future that should have included courtrooms and justice, not auction blocks and ownership. But debt doesn't care about your dreams. And in Seoul's underworld, everything has a price, including her. He was 43, ruthless, the kind of man who built empires on fear and bought people the way others bought art. She was supposed to be another acquisition, another pretty thing to break and discard. Except he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated her. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. The room smelled like old money and new sin. Ayana Okonkwo stood under lights hot enough to make her skin gleam with sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature. 22 years old and trembling, her body wrapped in a white slip dress that clung like a second skin. Around her, men in designer suits appraised her the way you'd examine a racehorse. Eyes calculating worth in increments that made her stomach turn. The red velvet curtains. The crystal chandeliers catching light like frozen tears. The kind of wealth that bought silence and made laws disappear. She'd been in Seoul for 6 months before everything shattered. Exchange program at Korea University, studying international human rights law. She'd been so proud. Her father had been so proud. First in their family to study abroad. A future that gleamed with promise. Then her father died. Heart attack. Sudden. Devastating. She'd flown home to Lagos for the funeral, buried him, mourned him. Thought the grief was the worst thing that could happen to her. She'd been wrong. The men came 2 weeks after she returned to Seoul. Her father's debts. Gambling debts she'd known nothing about. 12 million won owed to people who didn't accept payment plans or negotiate terms. They'd taken her from her dormitory at 3 a.m., grabbed her right out of her bed while her roommate screamed. And now she was here. Lot 34. The auctioneer announced in crisp, accentless English. He might have been European, Swiss, maybe German. He wore a tuxedo like this was Sotheby's, not a warehouse in Gangnam where human beings were sold like furniture. 22 years old. Nigerian national, currently enrolled at Korea University, studying law. Verified virgin. He let that word hang in the air. Virgin. Like it increased her value. Slow. Measured. Each step deliberate. The kind of pace that said he'd never hurried for anything in his entire life because the world waited for him, not the other way around. The crowd parted before him like water, men stepping back with their eyes lowered. Respect. Or fear. Probably both. He stepped into the light, and Ayana's breath caught in her throat. 43, maybe older. Korean, with sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they looked black under the lights. His hair was swept back from his face, black shot through with silver at the temples. Not gray, silver, like expensive cutlery that caught the light. The suit he wore probably cost more than her entire year's tuition. 3 pieces, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his frame. But the top button of his shirt was undone. Notie. Sleeves rolled up once at the cuffs. Somehow those small details made him more dangerous, not less. Like, he was so powerful he didn't need to follow anyone's dress code. He didn't look at the auctioneer. He looked at her. His gaze traveled from her face, down her body, back up again. Slow. Clinical. Assessing. Like, she was a car he was considering purchasing, and he wanted to check for defects before committing. Not leering, that would have been easier to hate. This was colder. More calculating. He was reading her like a balance sheet. 50 million won. The room exploded in whispers. 50 million. Roughly 40,000 US dollars. For her. The auctioneer's composure cracked, just for a second. His eyes widened before professional training snapped back into place. Mr. Kong. That's quite. Are you certain? Do I look uncertain? The man's voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Korean accent, but his English was flawless. Each word precisely placed, like he'd weighed every syllable before speaking it. The kind of control that came from years of commanding rooms. No, sir. Of course not. The auctioneer lifted his gavel, hand trembling slightly. 50 million won. Going once. He paused, scanning the room. No one moved. No one even breathed too loud. Going twice.
Silence.
Sold to Mr. Kong Minjun. The gavel came down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Ayana's vision tunneled. 50 million won. The number was incomprehensible. Obscene. What kind of man paid that much for a person? What was he going to do to her to justify that price? Kong Minjun walked toward the platform. Every step measured, controlled. When he reached the stairs, he stopped, tilted his head slightly.
Come.
Not a request. A command spoken with the absolute certainty it would be obeyed. Her body wouldn't respond. She stood frozen, every muscle locked in place by pure terror. He waited. 5 seconds. Then, I won't repeat myself. The guard behind her gave a small push. She stumbled down the stairs on shaking legs, and when she reached the bottom, Kong caught her arm. Not roughly, he didn't grab or yank, but firm. Inescapable. His hand was warm through the thin fabric of her dress. She could feel calluses on his palm. Strange for a man in a suit that expensive. What kind of work left calluses on hands that wore custom cufflinks? His thumb pressed against the inside of her wrist. Found her pulse. Held it there for a moment, feeling her heart hammer against his touch like a trapped bird. Terrified, he observed, like commenting on the weather. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Good. Fear keeps you compliant, makes you easier to train. He released her wrist and placed his hand on her lower back. Proprietary. Possessive. We're leaving. The Seoul night was cold, but Ayana barely felt it. Her body was numb, shock insulating her from everything except the heat of Kang's hand on her back. A black Genesis G90 waited at the curb, windows tinted so dark they looked like obsidian. Kong opened the passenger door himself, watched her climb in. She moved clumsily. The dress rode up her thighs. His eyes tracked the movement with that same clinical assessment, then returned to her face. Cataloging. Recording. Learning. Seatbelt. She fumbled with it. Her hand shook too badly to make the mechanism work. He leaned across her, his body close enough that she could feel his warmth radiating through his clothes, smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and leather, and something darker she couldn't name. His face was inches from hers as he reached for the seatbelt. This close, she could see he was even older than she'd thought. Early to mid-40s, with fine lines around his eyes that deepened when he concentrated. A small scar through his left eyebrow, old and pale. Another along his jawline, barely visible. There, he said softly, clicking the seatbelt into place.
See?
I can be gentle when it suits me. He closed her door, walked around to the driver's side.
Got in.
Started the engine. Classical music filled the car. Something orchestral and melancholy. Strings and piano. Beautiful and sad. They pulled away from the warehouse. Seoul passed by neon and shadow. Hangul signs she'd been learning to read, but still struggled with. Street vendors closing up their stalls for the night. Salarymen stumbling out of bars, ties loosened, faces flushed with soju. Normal people living normal lives. She wanted to scream, to pound on the windows, to make someone see her. But Kang's presence beside her was a gravitational force, pinning her in place. You're wondering what I'm going to do with you. He didn't phrase it as a question. Didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed on the road, hands relaxed on the steering wheel. She said nothing. Smart. Silence is a good default when you don't know the terrain. He changed lanes smoothly, no blinker. I'm 43 years old, Ayana. I've been in this business for 26 years. I started when I was 17. He glanced at her briefly, then back to the road. I've seen every form of resistance, every escape attempt, every manipulation tactic imaginable. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant, like they were discussing the weather. Crying, begging, trying to seduce me into letting you go. Hunger strikes. Suicide attempts. Violence. The car glided through traffic like a shark through water. None of them work. Do you know why? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because I'm patient. Infinitely patient. And because I always win. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel in rhythm with the music. I've never lost. Not once. Not in 26 years. The certainty in his voice was terrifying. You cost me 50 million won. That's not an impulse purchase. That's an investment. He took a turn, heading into what looked like an upscale neighborhood. High rises with more glass than concrete. And I protect my investments very carefully. What do you want from me? Her voice came out as a whisper. Broken. Everything. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Your time. Your attention. Your body. Your obedience. He paused. Eventually, if I do this right, your trust. In that order. I'll never trust you. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Yes, you will. That's what makes this interesting. You think you won't, but you will. The human mind is remarkably adaptable when survival is on the line. 20 minutes later, they pulled into an underground garage beneath a high-rise in Gangnam. Luxury apartments. The kind with security gates and doormen who knew when to look the other way. Kong punched a code into a private elevator. She tried to see the numbers, but his body blocked her view. They rose in silence, her ears popping with the altitude. 30 floors.
40.
45. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul. The city spread out below them like a circuit board, all lights and geometry, and in different beauty. The Han River cut through it like a dark vein. The apartment was modern.
Cold.
Black leather furniture. Marble floors. Abstract art on the walls. The kind that probably cost more than a house, but looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas. Everything was angles and clean lines.
No bottoms. No personality.
Like a showroom, not a home. This is your home now. Kong dropped his keys in a bowl by the elevator, shrugged out of his suit jacket, draped it over a chair. Underneath, his white shirt was crisp, expensive. Custom-made, probably. It fit him like a second skin. He rolled up his sleeves methodically, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. The rules are simple. You live here. You don't leave without my permission. You don't contact anyone from your previous life. Not your friends, not your roommate, not your school. You obey immediately when I give you an instruction. He walked to a bar cart in the corner, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler. Didn't offer her any questions. And if I don't, Ayana hugged herself, suddenly freezing despite the apartment's warmth. If I try to leave or call for help? He took a sip of whiskey, considering her question. I paid 50 million won for the privilege of teaching you what happens when you disobey. But you're clever. I saw that in your eyes during the auction. You were analyzing the room, looking for exits, calculating odds, even while you were terrified. He walked toward her with that same measured pace. That intelligence is why I bid so high. Most of the other men there wanted you, because you're beautiful.
Young.
Untouched. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I wanted you because you're smart. Intelligence can be trained, shaped. Beautiful things break easily, but brilliant things? Those can be transformed into something extraordinary. How did you? She stopped. Started again. My father. What exactly did he owe? You don't want to know.
Tell me.
Kong studied her face for a long moment. She could see him deciding how much truth to give her. Finally, he spoke. Your father borrowed money from an associate of mine. 10 million won initially for a business venture. A restaurant, I believe. It failed within 6 months. He swirled his whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the light. When he couldn't pay, he borrowed more to cover the interest. Then more to cover those debts. The cycle is predictable. People think they can outrun their obligations. He traced her jawline with one finger. She held perfectly still, barely breathing. When he died, the debt came to you, his only heir. The creditors were going to kill you. They'd already decided. There's no profit in killing debtors, but they couldn't let your father's default go unpunished. Bad for business. His thumb pressed against her lower lip. I bought the debt instead. All 12 million of it. Then I bought you. You could have just let me pay it back, she whispered. Given me time to work, to save. With what? His voice was patient, like explaining something to a child. You're a student on a visa. Even if you worked every day for the rest of your life, you'd never earn enough. And the interest compounds. Every day. Every hour. His thumb traced her bottom lip slowly. This way is simpler. You belong to me for as long as I want you. When I'm done, when I've gotten my money's worth, I'll let you go. The debt will be cleared. You walk away free. How long? That depends entirely on how satisfying I find you, how quickly you learn, how well you adapt. His eyes were dark, unreadable. Could be a year.
Could be 5.
Could be forever if you prove valuable enough. She jerked away from his touch. I'm not going to, I won't. You will. He said it with absolute certainty. No anger, no heat.
Just stating a fact.
But not tonight. Tonight you sleep. You adjust to your new reality. Tomorrow, we begin your education. He gestured to a hallway. Your room is the second door. There are clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom. Everything you need. I need to go home. This is home now. The sooner you accept that, the easier this becomes. He picked up his whiskey again. Took a sip. Go, Ayana. Before I change my mind about waiting. She went. The bedroom was like the rest of the apartment. Expensive and cold. A king bed with white silk sheets. Another wall of windows. A bathroom with a rain shower that could fit 4 people. The closet held clothes in her size. Someone had measured her. She realized with a sick feeling. Dresses, mostly. Form-fitting, expensive. Some jeans. Some tops. Nothing she would have chosen for herself. Everything designed to display rather than conceal. She locked the bathroom door and turned on the shower as hot as it would go. Stood under the spray until her skin turned red, trying to wash away the feeling of all those eyes on her. The auctioneer's voice announcing her like livestock. Kang's hand on her wrist, counting her heartbeats. His thumb on her lip. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her monthly rent, she found a silk nightgown laid out on the bed. She put it on because she had no other options. Climbed under the sheets because exhaustion had dragged her beyond the point of resistance. She didn't expect to sleep. Expected to lie awake all night, mind racing with escape plans and terror. But her body, pushed beyond its limits, pulled her under anyway. She woke to darkness and panic. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it came crashing back like a wave. The auction.
Kong. Soul. Trapped.
Ayana sat up, heart racing. The city glittered through the windows 45 floors below, indifferent to her terror. She looked at the bedroom door. Got up. Tried the handle. It opened. She stood in the doorway, frozen. He'd said she couldn't leave, but the door was unlocked. She could walk out right now. Down the hallway to the elevator. Maybe there was an emergency exit. Maybe. Going somewhere? She spun around, heart leaping into her throat. Kong stood in the hallway, leaning against his doorframe. Shirtless. Dress pants unbuttoned at the waist, hanging low on his hips. A rocks glass dangling from his fingers, whiskey catching the dim light. He looked like he'd been awake for hours. Or hadn't slept at all. 43 years old, and his body was all controlled violence. Scars across his ribs, old knife wounds, she could see now. A puckered scar on his left side that looked like a bullet hole. Muscle that came from something darker than gym memberships. A tattoo on his left ribs, Korean characters she couldn't read in the dim light. She didn't know how to finish the sentence. Testing. He sipped his whiskey, eyes never leaving her face. Smart. I would have been disappointed if you didn't try at least once. He pushed off from the doorframe, walked toward her with that predatory grace, each step measured and deliberate. The door doesn't lock because I want you to know something. He stopped inches away, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, feel the heat radiating from his bare chest. You can leave this room anytime you want. Walk right out that front door downstairs. Take the elevator. Go. Hope flared in her chest, bright and painful and terrifying in its intensity. But you won't. His free hand caught her chin, tilted her face up to his. His grip was gentle but inescapable. Want to know why? She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Because I'll find you. Seoul is my city, Ayana. I own half the police force. I have government officials on my payroll. Airport security reports to me. His thumb traced her trembling bottom lip. You wouldn't make it 3 blocks before someone spotted you and called me. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And when I found you, and I would find you, make no mistake about that, I'd make sure you never thought about running again. I wouldn't kill you. That would be a waste of my investment. But I'd make you wish I had. He released her chin, stepped back, took another slow sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving her face. I'm not a monster. I don't want you broken or terrorized into compliance. Broken things are boring, and I paid too much for boring. He gestured back toward her room. I want you obedient, yes. But I want you whole, intact. That's much more interesting. Do you understand the difference? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. Go back to bed. You'll need your rest. Tomorrow, your real education begins. She didn't move. That wasn't a suggestion, Ayana. She went. The next morning, she woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She found Kong in the kitchen, already dressed in another perfect suit. Charcoal gray this time, with a white shirt and silver tie. He was reading a newspaper, actual print, not digital, holding it like men twice his age. There was a plate of toast on the counter, a cup of coffee already made, cream and sugar beside it. Eat, he said without looking up. She sat, stared at the food. Her stomach was a knot of anxiety and hunger and nausea all twisted together. What happens now? Now you live here. We establish a routine. He turned a page, creasing it precisely. I work mostly from home. I have an office here. Sometimes I have to go out for meetings, but that's rare. Most people come to me. He took a sip of his own coffee. You'll stay here. You don't touch my office. The door at the end of the hall. You don't try to use the phone or the computer. You don't do anything without permission. He finally looked up from his newspaper. For now, you exist. You eat. You sleep. You adjust. That's all I'm asking. You can't just keep me prisoner. He lowered the newspaper slowly, looked at her over the top of it. I can. I am. And you're going to accept it because the alternative is worse. He folded the paper carefully, setting it aside. You think I'm cruel. I'm not.
I'm practical.
You were sold, Ayana. If not to me, then to someone else. Someone who might have hurt you for pleasure. Killed you when they got bored. Passed you around to their friends. His voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. I won't do any of those things. I'm investing in you, not destroying you. You're not going to touch me? Something dark flickered across his face. Not anger. Something else. Anticipation, maybe. I didn't say that. He stood, carried his coffee cup to the sink, rinsed it with the same precise movements he did everything else. But I'm not going to force myself on you. Not yet. Not until you're ready. I'll never be ready. He smiled, turned to look at her. You will. That's what makes this interesting. Right now, you hate me. You're terrified of me. You'd kill me if you thought you could get away with it. He walked toward her, and she fought the urge to bolt. But the human mind is remarkably adaptable. It has to be for survival. Give it time, and it will convince you that this apartment, this life is normal, acceptable, maybe even good. He stopped beside her chair, ran his fingers through her hair, almost gentle. That's not a flaw in you. It's biology, evolution. The same instinct that kept your ancestors alive will keep you here with me. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but something in his voice made her think he'd seen this play out before. He checked his watch. I have calls this morning. Stay in the common areas. The library has books. I noticed you were studying law. Feel free to read whatever you want. There's food in the refrigerator. Kitchen is yours. He paused in the hallway, looked back at her. And Ayana, don't try to leave. I meant every word I said last night. I will find you, and you won't like what happens after. He disappeared into his office. She heard the door close. Lock click into place. The hours crawled by like wounded things. She explored the apartment because there was nothing else to do. The living room with its expensive furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. The kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use, and a refrigerator stocked with food she didn't recognize, Korean ingredients, Japanese imports, expensive cuts of meat. The library was the only room that felt remotely lived in. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a leather armchair by the window, a small desk. Books in Korean, English, Japanese. Philosophy, business, law, ironic, given her situation. She ran her fingers along the spines. Found a collection of Nigerian authors, Chinua Achebe, Chimamanda Adichie, Wole Soyinka. Someone had researched her, known what she might want to read. That attention to detail was somehow more unsettling than anything else. She stood at the windows and stared at Seoul. Tried to orient herself. The Han River was visible from here, snaking through the city. She could see Namsan Tower in the distance. Gangnam stretched out below, all steel and glass and neon promise. Somewhere down there, her roommate Blessing was probably worried sick. Her professors wondering where she was. Her life continuing without her. Had anyone reported her missing? Or had Kang's people made it look like she'd left voluntarily? At night, she heard him moving through the apartment. Footsteps in the hallway. The clink of glass, another whiskey, probably. Water running in his bathroom. She stayed in her room, door closed but not locked, waiting for him to come to her. He didn't. Around midnight, there was a knock.
Come.
One word. Soft but absolute. She opened the door. He was standing in the hallway, still dressed but tie-loosened, top buttons of his shirt undone. Hair slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, human almost.
Follow me.
He led her to his office. It was darker than the rest of the apartment. Wood paneling instead of white walls. Leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with books and files. A massive desk made of dark wood, polished to a mirror shine. 2 large monitors. He sat down in his chair, gestured to his lap. Come here.
No. He sighed.
Not angry, just patient. The kind of patience that came from absolute certainty he'd win eventually.
Ayana.
Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to touch you inappropriately. I just want company while I work. His voice was almost gentle. I've been alone in this apartment for 3 years. I'm tired of being alone. So come here. This is insane. Perhaps. But it's happening regardless. You can come here willingly or I can make you. Either way, you end up in my lap. One way preserves your dignity. Choose. She approached slowly, every instinct screaming at her to run. When she was close enough, he reached out and pulled her into his lap. Arranged her with careful precision, her back against his chest, his chin resting on her shoulder, one arm banded around her waist. Casual ownership. His body was warm, solid. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, slow and steady. She hated that it felt safe. Read this. He angled one of the monitors toward her. Tell me if the translation is accurate.
It was a contract.
English to Korean. Business language she barely understood, something about shipping routes and import regulations. She stumbled through it, trying to focus on the words instead of the way his breath moved against her neck. Wrong. His hand slid up her thigh, not sexual, corrective, like adjusting a tool. Focus. The word there is mandatory, not necessary. The distinction matters. Read it again.
She did.
Corrected herself. He made a small sound of approval, and she hated that it sent a warm flush through her. They stayed like that for hours. Him working, typing with one hand, the other resting on her hip. Her sitting in his lap like a doll. his fingers drawing absent patterns on her skin through the thin fabric of her nightgown. Sometimes he'd ask her to translate something. Sometimes he'd teach her Korean words, business terms, commands, phrases she'd need to know. His voice was patient, methodical, like he was training an apprentice, not holding a captive. "Why?" she asked finally, voice small. "Why did you buy me?" His hand stopped moving for a moment, then continued, tracing slow circles on her hip. Truthfully, yes. I wanted something pure to ruin. The words sent ice through her veins. His lips brushed her ear. "I've been doing this a long time, Ayana. I've bought and sold more people than I can count. Used them, discarded them, forgotten them. They all blur together after a while." His voice was quiet, almost contemplative.
But you?
22 years old. Brilliant. Untouched. So much potential. I saw you on that platform and thought, here's something I could shape, mold, transform into exactly what I want. He turned her face toward him, his grip gentle but inescapable. "And I always get what I pay for." The days fell into a pattern that felt inevitable, like water finding its level. Mornings alone while he worked behind the locked door of his office. She could hear his voice sometimes, speaking in rapid Korean, business calls, negotiations, threats delivered in that same calm tone he used for everything. Afternoons in the library or staring out windows at a city that might as well have been on another planet. Nights in his office, sitting in his lap while he worked, his hands on her body in ways that weren't quite sexual, but weren't innocent either. Teaching her, training her, reprogramming her, one careful touch at a time. 3 weeks in, she stopped crying. She didn't realize it until he pointed it out. "You're adjusting," he said over breakfast. Toast she still couldn't eat. Coffee that tasted like ash in her mouth. She said nothing. His eyes narrowed. He set down his newspaper. "Look at me." She obeyed. Hated that she obeyed, without thinking. "You're angry." He sounded pleased. Almost proud. "Good. Anger means you're still fighting. I was worried you'd break too easily." He stood, circled the table, gripped her chair, and spun it to face him. Then he crouched, putting himself at eye level with her. "I don't want you broken, Ayana. Broken things are boring. They do what you say because they have no will left. Where's the satisfaction in that?" His hand cupped her face. The gesture was gentle, grotesque in its tenderness. "I want you defiant, struggling, hating me with every breath." His thumb pressed into her cheek. "Because when I finally take you, and I will take you, we both know that I want you to remember that you fought, that you resisted, that you hated every second of it." His eyes were black mirrors reflecting nothing. "And then I want you to come back the next morning. Sit at this table. Drink your coffee. Look at me just like you're doing now. That's when I'll know I've won." "I hate you," she whispered. "I know." His thumb stroked her cheekbone. "That's why I spent 50 million won. Most men would want you to love them, to look at them with adoration. I find that boring. I'd rather have your hatred. At least that's honest." "You're sick." "I'm honest," he corrected. "Most men would lie to you, tell you they cared about you, that this meant something beyond transaction and ownership. I won't insult your intelligence that way. You're here because I bought you, because I wanted you, because I could." He stood, walked to the sink, rinsed his coffee cup with those same precise movements. "But I'm patient. I can wait until you're ready, until your body stops fighting even if your mind hasn't caught up yet." "I'll never be ready." He turned, smiled. "We'll see." Time became strange. Days blurred together until she couldn't remember if it had been 4 weeks or 6. She learned his schedule, his preferences, the small signs of his moods. When he was stressed, he'd pour whiskey at 2 in the afternoon, stand at the windows and stare at the city like he was calculating its worth. When he was pleased, he'd ask her to translate more complex documents, test her Korean, correct her pronunciation with patient repetition. When he was angry, and she learned he was angry often, though he rarely showed it, his touch would linger a little longer. His grip would tighten just slightly. His voice would drop half an octave into something that made her skin prickle with instinctive fear. He never hit her, never raised his voice, never lost control. His control was absolute, and that was somehow worse than violence would have been. Violence she could fight against. But this careful, methodical breaking down of her defenses? She had no weapons against that. 6 weeks in, she tried to escape. She waited until he left for a meeting. Rare occurrence, someone important enough that they couldn't come to him. She watched from the window until his car pulled away from the building. Then she ran to the elevator. It required a code. 6 digits. She tried everything she could think of. His birthday, she'd found documents in the library with dates. Random numbers. Sequential numbers. Common combinations. Nothing worked. The elevator didn't budge. She tried the emergency stairs.
Locked.
Access code required. She went back to the elevator. Tried again. Failed again. She was still there, tears streaming down her face, when he came back. The elevator doors opened, and there he was. Still in his suit, tie perfectly knotted. He looked at her, at the tear tracks on her face, at her hands still pressed against the elevator keypad. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, which was so much worse. Come here. She shook her head, backing away. Ayana. His voice was soft, patient, terrifying in its gentleness. Come here. She went. What choice did she have? He pulled her into his arms. Not roughly, he didn't grab or yank or hurt. Just gathered her against his chest and held her while she sobbed, one hand stroking her hair like she was a child having a nightmare. I know, he murmured into her hair. I know it's hard, but you're making it harder than it needs to be. His hand moved in slow circles on her back. I told you from the beginning. There's no escape. This building is mine. The security is mine. Every person who works here reports to me. Even if you got out, where would you go? Your visa is expired. Your passport is gone. You have no money, no friends, no resources. He tilted her face up, thumbs wiping away her tears with surprising gentleness. I told you. There's no escape. The sooner you accept that, the easier this becomes. I want to go home. Her voice was broken, desperate. This is home. He said it with absolute certainty. Listen to me. Your old life is gone. Your friends have moved on. Your school has withdrawn your enrollment. Your apartment has been emptied. All of it gone. His thumb stroked her cheekbones. The only thing that exists now is this.
Me. Us.
This apartment. This life. Stop fighting it. It only hurts you. That night, he didn't call her to his office. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something break inside her. Something important. Some core of resistance that had been holding her together. It cracked, splintered, fell apart. The next morning, she came to breakfast without being called.
Sat down.
Picked up the toast. Ate it, even though it tasted like sand and she had to force herself to swallow. Calm watched her over his newspaper. Said nothing. But she saw the small smile at the corner of his mouth. Satisfaction.
Victory.
He was winning. And they both knew it. 3 months in, she stopped counting days. What was the point? Every day was the same. Every night identical. Time lost meaning when there were no weekends, no holidays, no variations in routine. She learned Korean faster than she'd learned anything in her life. Survival will do that. Immersion by captivity. She learned his business. Shipping. Import-export. He never named it explicitly, but she wasn't stupid. She saw the manifests, read the contracts. Money laundering, probably. Maybe drugs. Definitely illegal. The kind of operation that required police on the payroll and officials who looked the other way. She learned the names of his associates. Kim Taejun, second in command, always addressed as Hyung. Park Miho, muscle, from the scars on his knuckles in the security footage she'd glimpsed. Lee Ji-soo, the only woman, cold-eyed and brilliant with numbers. She learned how to answer the phone in Korean, how to pour his whiskey exactly the way he liked it. 2 fingers, no ice, in the crystal tumbler from the set his father had given him. How to stand when he had guests, where to wait, how to be present but invisible.
She learned his body.
The way he moved, economical and precise. The scars he collected like stamps on a passport. Knife wound on his ribs, bullet graze on his shoulder, burn mark on his forearm. The tattoo on his left side was a dragon, old school Korean style. He'd gotten it at 19, he told her once. The night he killed his first man. She didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know. The nights in his office became something else. Evolved into something more dangerous. He'd still hold her in his lap while he worked, but now his hands wandered more freely. Still not explicitly sexual. He hadn't broken that boundary yet. But pushing against it.
Testing.
Always testing. His fingers would trace patterns on her thigh. His lips would brush her neck. His hand would splay across her stomach, thumb rubbing circles just below her breast. Training her body to respond even when her mind screamed no. Tell me, he said one night, his hand splayed possessively across her stomach. Are you still afraid of me? She thought about lying. Decided on truth.
He always knew anyway.
Yes. Good. His breath was hot against her neck. But it's different now, isn't it? Not the same terror as that first night. He was right, and she hated him for it. The fear had changed. Become something more complex. Layered. She was still afraid of what he might do to her. But now there was another fear underneath. The fear of how her body responded to his touch. The fear that she was losing herself piece by piece. I'm going to kiss you now, he said. Not asking permission. Informing her. His hand turned her face toward him. His lips met hers.
Slow.
Controlled. Deliberate. He tasted of whiskey and something darker. His lips moved against hers with practiced skill, coaxing rather than forcing. She sat frozen in his lap, not responding, but not fighting either. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark, pupils dilated. Kiss me back.
No.
Kiss me back, Ayana.
No.
He smiled. Actually smiled, like she'd pleased him. Still fighting.
Good.
He turned her back to face the monitors, dismissed her resistance like it was nothing. We have time. All the time in the world. 5 months.
She stopped thinking about escape.
Stopped crying at night. Started sleeping through until morning, her body finally accepting that there was no danger in sleep, no escape in dreams. Her body betrayed her. Adjusting. Acclimating to captivity, like a plant bending toward the only source of light available. Kong noticed everything. You're settling in, he said one morning over breakfast. A routine now, comfortable in its predictability.
She ate. He read.
Almost domestic if you ignored the fact that she was his prisoner. That's good. It means we can move forward. Forward to what? But she knew. Had known for weeks. Had felt it coming like storm clouds gathering. He set down his newspaper. Folded it precisely. You know what? Her stomach dropped. I'm not. You are.
He stood.
Walked around the table with that predatory grace.
Pulled her to her feet.
You've been here 5 months. You obey me without hesitation. You come when I call. You've stopped fighting, stopped crying, stopped hoping for rescue. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. You're ready.
No.
But her voice was weak, unconvincing even to herself. Yes. He kissed her again.
Deeper this time.
His tongue demanding entry. She kept her mouth closed. He bit her lower lip, not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to make her gasp. His tongue swept in, claiming, possessing. She pushed at his chest. He caught her wrists easily, held them. Kept kissing her until she stopped struggling, until her body went limp with the futility of resistance. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard.
Tonight, he said.
I'm done waiting. She spent the day in her room, panic clawing at her throat with razored claws. This was it. The inevitable endpoint she'd been running toward since the moment he bought her. At 7, there was a knock on her door.
Come.
She didn't move. Couldn't make her body obey. The door opened. Kong stood there in dark slacks and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. He looked at her curled on the bed, shaking. I'm not going to force you, he said quietly. If you say no, if you fight me, I'll walk away. For tonight. He leaned against the doorframe, relaxed, patient. But you need to understand something. I bought you. You're mine. This was always going to happen. The only question is whether you make it easy or hard on yourself. That's still force. Her voice cracked.
No.
His voice was matter-of-fact. Force would be holding you down, taking what I want regardless of your screams, ignoring your pain. He pushed off from the doorframe. I'm offering you a choice. Participate, and it can be not pleasant perhaps, but not traumatic. Or fight me and make it worse for yourself. Your body will tense. It will hurt more. You'll have bruises, trauma, some choice. It's more than most people in your position get. I could walk in here right now and take what I've already paid for. Instead, I'm giving you agency. He looked at her, and something in his eyes made her throat tight. I'll be in my room. You have 1 hour to decide. If you don't come, I'll take that as your answer. But tomorrow, we'll have this conversation again. And the next day. And the next. Eventually, you'll be too tired to fight. He paused in the doorway. I'm patient, Ayana. But even my patience has limits. And when those limits are reached, you won't like what happens. He left. She sat in the silence, mind racing in circles like a trapped animal. She could fight, scream, maybe hurt him enough to get to the elevator. But she didn't know the code. The stairs were locked. Even if she got out, he'd find her. He'd told her that from day one, and she believed him. She was trapped, had been trapped since the auction. Maybe even before that, the moment her father made his first bad bet. The hour passed. Each minute an eternity.
She stood.
Smoothed down her nightgown with shaking hands. Walked to his door on legs that didn't feel like her own.
Knocked. Come in.
His room was darker than hers. Larger. The same wall of windows overlooking Seoul, but the view seemed different from here. More possessive. Like he really did own the whole city spread out below. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, still dressed. He looked at her, expression unreadable. I'm here, she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised her. I see that. He stood, walked to her slowly, giving her time to bolt if she was going to. You understand what's going to happen? Yes. And you're choosing this? I'm choosing not to fight you. The distinction felt important. Necessary. That's not the same as choosing this. No, he agreed, but it's close enough. His hand cupped her cheek, and despite everything, his touch was gentle. I'll be gentle. I promise you that. The first time, he kissed her differently. Slower. Almost careful, like she was something precious rather than something bought. His hands moved to the hem of her nightgown, pulled it up and over her head with agonizing slowness, giving her 1,000 chances to say no. She stood naked in front of him, fighting every instinct to cover herself. Beautiful, he murmured. Not like a compliment, like an observation. An asset appreciating in value. Even better than I imagined. He undressed himself methodically. She kept her eyes on his face, not wanting to look down. But she couldn't help noticing in her peripheral vision, his body was exactly what she'd expected. Scars and muscle, and the evidence of violence survived. 43 years old, and he looked like violence incarnate. He laid her on the bed, positioned her the way he wanted with careful precision. His touch was clinical at first, testing her responses. Finding what made her gasp, what made her flinch, what made her body betray her with unwanted sensation. Learning her body the way he'd learned everything else about her. Methodically, thoroughly, with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Relax, he said against her throat, his lips brushing her pulse point. Fighting only makes it hurt more. She tried.
Failed.
Her body was rigid with tension, every muscle locked. He sighed, rose up on his elbows to look at her, really look at her. Ayana, look at me.
She did.
I own you, your body, your time, your choices. That's the reality we exist in. His hand stroked her hair, almost tender. But I'm not a monster. I don't want to hurt you. I want this to be good for you. Or, at least not terrible.
How?
Her voice broke. How can this ever be anything but terrible? Because you're already here. Because it's already happening. Because you can either spend the next hour in agony, or you can breathe, let go, accept it. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I know it's not what you want, but it's what you have. Make the best of it. There was a terrible logic to his words. A sick, twisted logic that made sense even though it shouldn't. She hated him for it. Hated herself more for understanding. She closed her eyes, breathed, tried to make her body relax, to unclench muscles she didn't remember tensing. Good girl, he murmured, and the praise sent warmth through her that she immediately hated herself for feeling. When he finally entered her, it hurt. She'd expected that. But he went slowly,
Carefully.
watching her face with that same focused intensity he brought to everything, stopping when she tensed too much, waiting for her to breathe through it, whispering things in Korean she didn't fully understand. Some of them might have even been kind. After he held her, she lay rigid in his arms, feeling broken in ways that had nothing to do with physical pain, feeling like she'd lost something essential that she could never get back. Sleep, he said into her hair, his voice surprisingly gentle. It gets easier. I promise you that. It gets easier.
She didn't sleep. Couldn't.
Just lay there in his arms, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out who she was now that this line had been crossed. But she stayed in his arms because she had nowhere else to go. The next morning, she returned to her room, showered for an hour, water as hot as she could stand, trying to wash away the feeling of his hands on her skin. When she finally emerged and came to breakfast, Kong was reading his newspaper.
Didn't look up when she sat down.
Coffee's fresh, he said, like nothing had changed. Like the world hadn't fundamentally shifted on its axis. Toast is there. Like everything had changed, but also nothing had changed. The days continued.
And the nights.
He called for her more often now. Sometimes gentle, like that first time. Sometimes less so, when the stress of his business made him harder, more demanding. She learned to separate herself from her body, to float somewhere above it while he took what he wanted, what he'd paid for, to turn herself into a spectator of her own life. Dissociation, the psychology textbooks would call it. A trauma response. She called it survival. 6 months turned into 7.
8.
The seasons changed outside the windows. Seoul's brutal summer gave way to autumn, then winter.
She stopped counting that, too.
One morning, she woke and realized she'd slept through the night in his bed. Not her room, his. Her body curved against his like it belonged there. He was already awake, getting dressed for a meeting. She watched him button his shirt through half-closed eyes. Not his tie with practiced precision. 43 years old, and she could map every scar on his body now. Could predict his moods by the set of his shoulders, the line of his jaw. Knew him better than she'd ever known anyone. I have to go to Busan, he said, catching her watching him in the mirror. 3 days. Business I have to handle personally. He turned to face her. You'll stay here alone. The apartment will be locked. Security will be monitoring remotely, but you'll be alone.
He walked to the bed, sat on the edge.
I'm trusting you not to do anything stupid.
Why?
The word came out hoarse, rough with sleep. Because you're smart. Because you know by now that there's no escape.
Because.
He paused, something shifting in his expression. Because I think you've stopped wanting to escape. She wanted to deny it, wanted to scream that she still hated him, still wanted to be free, still counted every day until she could get away. But she couldn't. The lie wouldn't come. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. 3 days. Then I'll be back. He left that afternoon. She wandered the empty apartment like a ghost haunting her own life. Sat in his office chair. Slept in his bed because her own room felt too small, too unfamiliar now. Stood at the windows and stared at Seoul, and wondered when she'd stopped seeing the city as freedom and started seeing it as just lights. Just buildings. Just a view. 3 days later, he came back. She was sitting on the couch reading one of his books, philosophy, something dense about the nature of freedom and captivity that felt like a sick joke. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her. Just stopped and stared. You're still here. Where else would I go? Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction. Or something else entirely. Come here. She went. Hated how automatic it had become. How her body obeyed before her mind could process the command. He pulled her into his arms. Kissed her hard, possessive, different from before. Less controlled. More desperate. I thought about you, he said against her mouth. The entire time. Every meeting, every negotiation. I kept thinking about coming home to you. Don't. She tried to pull back. Don't pretend this is something it's not. What is it then? His eyes searched hers. Tell me what this is, Ayana. Because I bought you 9 months ago, and you're still here. The door's unlocked. You could have tried to leave while I was gone. But you didn't. I had nowhere to go. There's always somewhere to go. If you wanted to badly enough. She didn't have an answer for that. That night, when he reached for her, she didn't go rigid. Didn't separate herself from her body. Didn't float away to that safe place in her mind. She was there. Present. Hating herself for it. Hating him for making her feel something other than pure revulsion. After, lying in the dark, he said, I could let you go. Her heart stopped. What? The debt is paid. Has been for months, actually. The interest I was charging was fictional. A way to keep you here. His voice was quiet. Matter of fact. I could give you your freedom. Money. A plane ticket home. You'd never have to see me again. She should have said yes. Should have begged for it. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to see what you choose. His hand found hers in the dark. Threaded their fingers together. I've taken everything from you. Your freedom. Your choices.
Your body.
Your innocence. He brought her hand to his lips. Kissed her knuckles. I want to give one thing back. This one choice. Stay or go. That's cruel. Yes. His voice was soft. Almost apologetic. It's the cruelest thing I can do to you. Because we both know what you're going to choose. She lay awake the rest of the night, his words echoing in her skull. By morning, she still hadn't decided. Couldn't decide. The choice itself felt like another form of captivity. At breakfast, he was reading his newspaper like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't just offered her the world and set it on fire at the same time. I need more time, she said. He turned a page. You have all the time you want. I'm not going anywhere. He glanced at her over the paper. Neither are you. Until you decide you are. The days after were different. Worse, somehow. Before, she'd had the clarity of captivity. She was trapped. He was her captor. Simple. Horrible. But simple. Now, every moment felt like a choice she was making. Every time she came to breakfast. Every time she answered when he called her name. Every night, she went to his bed instead of staying in her own room. Was she choosing him? Or just choosing not to choose? You're thinking too much, Kong said one evening. They were in his office, her in his lap, as always. But his hands were still tonight, just holding her. I can practically hear it from here. How can you give me a choice and then act like nothing's changed? Because nothing has changed. You were always free to hate me, to resist, to make every moment a battle. His fingers threaded through her hair. The only difference is now you know you can walk away. And you're still here. That's not fair. No, he agreed. It's not. 9 months. She'd been his for 9 months. The number felt significant, though she couldn't say why. Long enough to grow a life. Long enough to kill one. Long enough to transform completely into someone she didn't recognize. She started noticing things she'd trained herself not to see. Small details that made him human rather than just her captor. The way he took his coffee, black, no sugar. But he'd add cream if he was stressed, like the sweetness could cut through whatever was weighing on him. The scar through his left eyebrow that he'd touch unconsciously when he was thinking through a problem. How he'd stand at the window at 3 a.m., sleepless, whiskey in hand, carrying weight she'd never asked about. "You never talk about yourself," she said one night. He looked at her, surprised. "You never ask. I'm asking now." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you want to know?" "Why do you do this? The business, the violence, all of it." "Because I'm good at it." "That's not an answer." He smiled slightly.
No.
"It's not." He pulled her closer, arranging her more comfortably in his lap. "My father was a fisherman.
Honest man. Poor man.
Died when I was 15. Heart attack on the boat." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his grip tightened on her. "Left my mother with debts she couldn't pay." "Sound familiar?" Ayana went very still. The men he owed came for payment. They couldn't take the boat. It was worthless, old, barely functional. "Couldn't take our house, we rented. So they offered to clear the debt if my mother worked for them." He paused. She agreed. "To save me." His voice didn't change. 28 years of practice, keeping emotion out. She killed herself 3 months later. Jumped off Mapo Bridge downtown. They found her body 2 days later. Kong. I was 16. I found the men responsible. Killed the first one with my father's gutting knife. The second with my hands. The third. He smiled, and it was terrifying. The third saw what I was capable of and offered me a job instead of dying. He looked at her, and his eyes were empty. "So when you ask why I do this, why I bought you, it's because I can. Because the world taught me that everything has a price, including people, including mercy, including whatever passes for love in this life. This isn't love." "No," he agreed. "But it's the only thing I know that looks like it." Something cracked in her chest. Not sympathy, she wouldn't give him that. But understanding. The kind that made everything worse instead of better. "You could choose different," she whispered. "So could you." His thumb traced her jaw. "Yet here we are." 10 months.
Her Korean was fluent now. Perfect.
She could read his contracts, understand his phone calls, translate documents without stumbling. He'd taught her well, molded her into something useful. "You should go back to school," he said one morning over breakfast. She looked up, startled. "What?" "Medical school. You were studying law, but you mentioned once that you wanted to be a doctor, before your father pushed you toward law." How did he remember that? She'd said it months ago, barely awake, rambling about her childhood. He folded his newspaper. "There's a program here. Seoul National University Medical School. I can arrange admission. You'd attend during the day. Come home at night."
Come home.
The words tasted strange. "Unless you'd prefer to stay here. But you're too intelligent to waste." He stood, carried his coffee to the sink. "Think about it."
She did.
For days. It felt like another test. Another way to see if she'd choose captivity when offered something like freedom. But it was also medical school. The thing she'd wanted since she was 8 years old, watching doctors save her grandmother's life. "I'll go," she said finally. Kong nodded. Made a phone call. 2 weeks later, she had admission papers. A schedule. Textbooks in Korean. The first day, he drove her himself. Pulled up to the campus, engine idling. "The terms haven't changed," he said. "You come back every evening."
You don't tell anyone about me.
"About us. You don't try to contact anyone from your old life." "I know." "Do you?" He looked at her. Really looked. "Because you'll be around people your own age. Normal people living normal lives. Medical students worried about exams and internships and dating. It would be easy to forget. To convince yourself you could just disappear into that world. And if I did, I'd find you," said with absolute certainty. "But I don't think you will." "Why not?" He reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture familiar now, almost tender. "Because you're too honest. Even with yourself. Especially with yourself." He pulled back.
Go.
"You'll be late." Medical school was strange. She was older than most of the students, not in years, but in experience. They complained about exams and dating and part-time jobs. She sat in lectures about anatomy and thought about the scars on Kang's body, learned about trauma responses, and recognized herself in every textbook description. A classmate asked her to study one evening. Jinwoo, 23. Earnest smile. No shadows in his eyes. There's a group of us meeting at a cafe. You should come. She almost said yes. Then, I can't. I have to get home. Tomorrow, then? I'll think about it. She told Kong about it that night. Didn't know why. Testing him, maybe. Testing herself. Do you want to go? He asked. I don't know. That's not what I asked. She was quiet. Then, yes. I think I do. Then go. He said it simply. I told you the terms. You come home at night. I didn't say you couldn't have a life during the day. You're not angry? Should I be? He pulled her into his lap. Routine. Ritual. Home. You think I'm threatened by a 23-year-old boy who wants to study with you? I think you're threatened by anything you can't control. He laughed. Actually laughed. You're right. But I'm trying. His hand settled on her hip. Go to your study group. Make friends. Have a life. Then come back to me at night. That's all I want. It felt like a trap. Everything with him felt like a trap.
But she went anyway.
The study group was good. Normal. They argued about pharmacology. Shared notes. Complained about professors. Jinwoo smiled at her a lot. Made jokes. Offered to walk her to the subway. I have a ride, she said. Boyfriend. The words stuck in her throat. What was Kong? Her owner? Her captor? Her? It's complicated. Jinwoo nodded like he understood. He didn't. Couldn't. But that was okay. She told Kong about it that night in his office. How Jinwoo had made her laugh. How strange it felt to be around people who didn't know what she was. What she'd become. Do you like him? Kong asked. His tone was casual, but his hand tightened on her waist. Not the way you mean. How do you know what I mean? Because I know you. She twisted to look at him. 43 years old and handsome in that brutal way of his. Silver threading through his hair more prominently.